Hello and welcome to the short video for Class 19 and also the paper deadlines. So, paper deadlines. Yesterday, some of you listened to this on June 12th, 2024, was the deadline for the +5 bonus. To turn the paper in by then, get the +5 added on to your base score. The next deadline is the emergency deadline, which is full credit and is June 18th. And then the 50% deadline is June 20th. Some frequently asked questions for the paper. First, if you did turn the paper for the +5 deadline, you do not need to turn the paper in again. Once is enough. That would be your paper score. Now, when the emergency deadline rolls around, that would be a 0, and then the 50% deadline would be a 0 as well, but that +5 paper grade would be your paper grade. If you already did turn in the paper with a +5 deadline and turn in another paper for the emergency deadline, the emergency deadline paper doesn't keep that +5 for obvious reasons. Otherwise, the +5 deadline, extra credit deadline, the real deadline would be meaningless. If you didn't turn in a paper with a +5 deadline, there'll be a 0 grade for that +5 deadline. That's working as intended because the deadline for that is passed. If there's no grade in there, it's a 0. The emergency deadline doesn't require that there be an actual emergency. Originally, it was intended so I didn't have to deal with, and students didn't have to deal with things like getting excuses, etc. And it was intended that, okay, things can go wrong, computer issues, illnesses, life, etc. And it was just like, a week extension. And you don't have to have an emergency to use it. You don't need like an excuse or anything. It's just, the extra time. You don't get the +5, but you get the extra time. Your paper grade is the best of the 3 deadlines. You don't have to turn in, multiple times again because Canvas drops the 2 lowest automatically. So you only need to turn the paper in once, and that's the one that counts. So one time is enough. For the content for class 19, it's all about ethics. So video 86, video 87 are Introduction to Ethics Part 1 and also Part 2. And ethics, of course, is all about good and evil and all that stuff. And philosophers look at various, levels of problems. As we'll see in the video, there's very abstract things, sometimes called metaethics, which deals with big, broad questions like what is good, what is evil? Not like particular things, but in general, what is goodness and what is evil? Another example would be questions about, is morality objective or subjective? As I say, is it something that one can be like correct or incorrect about objectively, or is it just a matter of, say, opinions or feelings? Is ethics, more like science or more like, taste in food? And people have been doing ethical theories since there have been people. And so there are, hundreds of ethical theories. And if you take into account like all the variations by different individual philosophers, thousands. So lots of ethics out there. Now, when people do ethics, they're usually more concerned with what we call in the business applied ethics, taking particular moral theories, perhaps, or moral principles, standards, rules, etc., and applying them to particular situations, hence applied ethics. And so if you are concerned about, say, the ethics of using violence to settle political disputes, that'd be a case of applied ethics. You might pick a particular conflict. Or if you're concerned about, say, the ethics of, say, rights and freedom of expression, you might pick a particular, law in a particular state and that limits freedom of expression and, look at the ethics of that. And so ethics, again, good and evil, all that stuff. And the introductions cover, look at what is ethics, look at the spectrum of morality, which is looking at things from the range of being like absolute. There's only one true morality, no exceptions, all the way to subjectivism, which is morality is just kind of a matter of, feeling or opinion. Also, what's called moral nihilism, that ethics is about nothing, basically fiction. Also talk about value, negative worth, positive worth, intrinsic, extrinsic, etc. Now, since this is just an intro class, we'll only look at a very little bit of ethics. In the spring semester every year, I teach PHI 3601 ethics. So if you want more good and evil and stuff, there's that class. And the person could spend an entire professional career just focused on ethics, because again, we've been doing ethics a long time. There's thousands of potential theories, millions of potential issues. You could do ethics your whole life, every day. Now, we'll look at two of the big dogs of ethics, utilitarianism and deontology. Obviously not the only ones, but these are probably the best known. And even in, say, pop culture or everyday life, we've encountered these. Utilitarianism, put in bumper sticker terms, would be, on sort of the nice version, would be the greatest good for the greatest number. A harsher version would be that the ends justify the means. So, in general, what utilitarianism is this. It's a view that you assess actions based on their consequences. So actions themselves are not good or bad, it's the effects they bring about. They also, when a utilitarian does their thing, they have to answer a couple questions. One is, when you're doing this assessment of actions, what is the measure? What is the utility? Which is kind of a term for value. How do you keep score? And most common answer, and the one that Mill gives, is happiness is positive value, pain, unhappiness, negative value. And other utilitarians take other approaches. They might just be straight up, pain and pleasure. There's also ones that look at like desires, some look at interest. But happiness, unhappiness, usually the most common. The utilitarian also has to answer the question of, okay, when you're doing this utilitarian calculation, weighing up the positives and the negatives, who counts? Whose happiness and unhappiness matters? Mill is super generous, as we'll see. He allows it for, all humans, and pretty much anything that feels pleasure or pain, anything that can be happy or unhappy. Other utilitarians a bit more narrow in their scope. And so if you were a utilitarian, you'd have to answer the question, what is utility? How do you measure stuff? And also the question of who counts. As an example, people who do animal rights, concerns about animal ethics, if they're building kind of a moral theory, using academic moral theories, they often go with utilitarianism. Famous example being Peter Singer, his book Animal Liberation. And the usual argument, for all this is, well, we might enjoy, say, eating a hamburger, but the harm done to the cow, perhaps the environment, etc., is far greater than our enjoyment. That's to say that our happiness in eating a burger is vastly outweighed by the negative consequences. And so that would be an example of, how you, if you're a broad scope of morality, how you might include, things other than people. You might include cows. You might include other stuff as well. Now, utilitarians obviously don't agree on how far this scope should go. A person could be utilitarian and limit morality to humans, or just humans they like. Or in the most extreme version, called ethical egoism, where I would just limit to myself. Only I matter morally, which is, pretty extreme. And some critics say is just, basically just selfishness with a theory. The first person we'll look at, and only person we'll look at, is for utilitarianism, is our good dead friend John Stuart Mill. English guy, wrote a lot of stuff, died, still dead today. So that's the planned content for Class 19, Ethics. As always, if you haven't got the notes, readings, or paper guide yet, download them from these links if you haven't got them. Coursework for today, well, Class 19, is no work. The course will be stuff in the future. So that's the stuff for Class 19. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.